Hello class, good afternoon everybody. I welcome you one and all to today's lecture class on epidemiological methods, descriptive epidemiology. If you have a recap of the previous class where we had discussed about the various indicators of health and also discussed comprehensively on mortality indicators. Today's lecture class will be based on epidemiological methods. The primary concern of any epidemiologist is to study the disease occurrence in people or community who during the course of time or of their lives have experienced various factors and circumstances which may be closely associated with etiology of the disease. Unlike the clinician or the laboratory investigator who studies the disease more accurately, the epidemiologist uses carefully designed strategies or methods where he is able to study the disease etiology in a community. The epidemiological methods or studies are various types. They are divided into observational studies, experimental or intervention studies. Observational studies are again divided or subdivided into descriptive studies and analytical studies. Descriptive studies, the unit of the study is the population. In analytical studies, the subtypes are ecological study or correlation study, where the unit of studies is the communities. In cross-sectional study or prevalence study, the unit of study is the individual. In case control study or case reference study, the unit of study is again the individual. Cohort study or the follow-up study, the unit of studies is the individual. In the experimental or intervention studies, it is again subdivided into RCTs, field trials, and community trials. RCT is nothing but randomized controlled trials where we use patients as units of study. In field trials or community trials, we use healthy individuals as units of study, and in community trials or studies where we use communities as a unit of study. All these studies are not basically watertight compartments, they complement each other. In observational studies is we observe the nature making experiments and we measure the occurrence of the disease in the observational studies. In experimental and intervention studies, we make an experiment or we do an intervention so as to cause a change in the particular study. Observational studies are based on the field observations made on experiments carried out by nature. Observational studies allow nature to take its own course. The investigator measures but does not intervene, as I said earlier. Now coming to descriptive studies or epidemiology. The best study of mankind is the study of man. This descriptive studies is based upon the observations on populations or communities. Examples are, if you look into the how diseases have been discovered or noted, can be very well understood by the example. Burkitt has led to the discovery of discovery of Burkitt's lymphoma, in which he said that Epstein-Barr virus is a causative organism. Likewise, in New Zealand, the Kuru disease, which is a chronic degenerative disease, is likewise incriminated by slow virus infections, and that is how the descriptive observations or description of the observations is concerned in this particular study. So descriptive study is limited to the description of the occurrence of a disease in population. They are usually the first phase of a epidemiological investigation. These studies are concerned while observing the distribution of disease or health related characteristics in human population and identifying the characteristics in which the disease in question seems to be associated. Such studies basically ask the questions like, when is the disease occurring? So what is the time distribution of the disease, when it is occurring, where it is occurring, that is the place distribution of the disease. Who is getting the disease, that is the percent distribution of the disease. The various procedures involved in descriptive studies can be noted in the next slide. The various procedures in descriptive studies are defining the population to be studied, defining the disease and the study, describing the disease by time, place, and person. I mean time distribution, place distribution, person distribution of the disease, measurement of disease, comparing with known indices, formulation of a etiological hypothesis. Today we are going to study the first three, and the rest of the procedures will be discussed in the next lecture class. Now, defining the population to be studied. The first thing is, in descriptive study, we study the populations and not the individuals. Here we try to define the population in terms of its, not only in terms of its number, but also its various characteristics like age, sex, occupation, and other similar other variables which are required for it. Now here, the defined population, as I was saying, is also known as population at risk, can be the whole population in a geographical area, or more often a representative sample taken from it. The defined population can also be a specifically selected groups such as age and sex groups, occupational groups, hospital patients, school children, small communities, and wider groupings where, or any other group where the number of people can be easily counted. Now, what are the characteristics of the defined population? The defined population should be large enough so that age and sex indicators can be easily calculated. It should be stable. That is, there should not be any migration of people, and outsiders have to be excluded, like visitors and relatives. There should be participation from the community in the defined population. All the people in the population have to be enumerated. This defined population should not be overtly different from other communities in the region, and health facilities should be close enough to provide easy access for patients requiring medical services. Example, Framingham Heart Study in US. When the study was done in Framingham, all the characteristics of the population that were mentioned earlier, like large, stable, community participation, should not be overtly different, and health facilities, availability of health facilities, were taken into consideration while doing the study in Framingham. The defined population, or population at risk, as we also call it, is crucial in epidemiological studies as it provides the denominator for calculating rates, which are essential to measure the frequency of the disease and study its distribution and determinants. Thus, we consider epidemiologists as a person or a man in search for a denominator. As we discussed about the different rates earlier, we have a numerator and a denominator. So the denominator is provided by the defined population, which is one of the steps or procedures in descriptive epidemiology, that is defining the population under study. Now, defining the disease under study. The disease under study has to be defined properly. Here, the needs of the clinicians and the epidemiologists may diverge. The clinician may may diagnose the disease in light of his knowledge and may revise if the diagnosis proves wrong. But the epidemiologist requires a very specific definition of the disease under study. So the specific definition is called an operational definition or case definition. That is a definition by which the disease or condition can be identified and measured in a defined population with a degree of accuracy. Example, tonsillitis. So he needs to spell out the various criteria in an operational definition as far as epidemiologist is concerned. So it spells out the criteria by which a disease can be measured, as I said earlier. So what are the criteria in case of tonsillitis? If a clinician has to look for tonsillitis, he has to see the enlarged tonsils, which is caused by Streptococcus pyogenes. Whereas an epidemiologist has to look for enlarged red tonsils covered by a white exudate, of which one identified identified by a throat swab, will yield predominantly Streptococcus pyogenes. It means he needs to look into the different criteria of enlarged tonsils, red in color, and on isolation by the throat swab culture, it has to predominantly yield Streptococcus pyogenes. So these are the various criteria for an operational definition. So an operational definition has to be very precise and valid so that not only the doctor or the epidemiologist, but also other healthcare workers or the ground staff who are actually conducting the survey can collect the exact number of cases of tonsillitis. So for them, certain criteria has to be given, and this criteria is what is specified in an operational case definition. Describing the disease, that is the third step as far as this particular descriptive epidemiology is concerned. The primary objective of descriptive epidemiology is to describe the occurrence and distribution of disease or health-related events or characteristics within the population by time, place, and person, and identifying those characteristics associated with presence or absence of the disease in individuals. So what he essentially has to try to look is the distribution of disease or health-related events. It can be a smoking, it can be gambling, it can be violence, or it can be accidents. And he has to find out the occurrence of such health-related events or the diseases by in relation to time. What is the time it is occurring? Place, where it is occurring? Person, to whom it is occurring? And whether those characteristics or the events are associated with the disease or not. So all this requires systematic collection and analysis of data. The epidemiologist has to be familiar with few of the variables under time, place, and person distribution. So common characteristics or variables frequently examined in descriptive studies in relation to time, place, and person are: under time, what we have is year, season, month, week, day, hour of onset, and duration. So these are the variables which need to be studied under time. Likewise, under place, we need to study about the various climatic zones. Whether it is a tropical zone, whether it is an Arctic zone, whether it is a rainy zone where the rain is predominant, or whether winter is predominant in a particular zone. By country or region, whichever in which country it is occurring, or which region of a particular country is having the disease or the events that is occurring. Whether it is an urban area or a rural area that is affected, or whether it is a local community in a particular area that is affected. Whether towns are affected, whether cities are affected, or whether institutions, it can be a college, it can be a hospital, it can be a office, which can be affected. The various characteristics or variables what we see in a person is, considered in a person is, while studying the disease characteristic is age, sex, marital state, whether married or not, what occupation the person is doing, which social class that the person belongs to what level the person is educated, under education. Birth order, whether he comes first or whether he comes last in the birth order. What is the family size or the demographic size of the family? What is the height of the person? What is the weight of the person concerned? Is he normal height, or is of low height? Whether it is of heavy weight or low weight? Whether the blood pressure is normal or hypertensive, whether blood cholesterol is normal or there is hyperlipidemia or dyslipidemia, and what are the various personal habits that are concerned, are frequently studied in descriptive studies or examined in descriptive studies. It can be smoking, it can be drinking or chewing tobacco or putting snuff, or various other personal habits, or gambling or sedentary habits, which can be examined in descriptive studies. Time distribution. In time distribution, the time of occurrence of a particular disease or health related event, say the hour of onset or the day of the week or the month or year when the a year where the event is occurring, will give you the time trend or the distribution of the disease. So what it has been observed is the epidemiologists have identified three kinds of time trends or fluctuations in disease occurrence. They can be short-term fluctuations, periodic fluctuations, long-term or secular trends. The fluctuation word is also used for trend. So fluctuation and trends are synonymous. Short-term fluctuations. The best short-term fluctuation in occurrence of a disease is an epidemic. Now, what is an epidemic? An epidemic is the occurrence of disease in a community or region of usually above the normal expectancy or frequency. So it can be occurrence of a disease or health-related events in a region clearly in excess of normal frequency. See, anything above the normal frequency is said to be an epidemic. And usually the epidemicity or the consideration of an epidemic to a particular disease is relative to usual frequency of the disease in the same area among the specified population at the same season of the year. So what I mean to say is it is all relative to a particular aspect of the disease or the particular number of the disease. The data in tabular format in the next slide illustrates this particular point. Now, if you look into this particular trend of dengue or dengue hemorrhagic fever in India 2005 to 2007. So in 2005, we have the dengue cases starting from January to December. What we observe is in the month of July, the late summer and early rainfall, we find there is the peaking of cases starting from July and ending up to November. So this signifies the occurrence of the epidemic. Likewise, in 2006, we again find that there is again the number of cases have increased tremendously from July and peaks up to November, in the month of November. Likewise, in 2007, we again note that again the number of cases there is more in the month of July and ending up to November. Now, what are the types of epidemics? Types of epidemics are common source epidemics, propagated epidemics, slow or modern epidemics. The common source epidemics are either it can be a single exposure or point source epidemics. Continuous or multiple exposure epidemics. Propagated epidemics are, that is propagation, that is from one to another. Person, it can be person to person, arthropod vector, or animal reservoir. The third type of epidemic under short-term fluctuations or short-term trends are slow or modern epidemics. So you can remember by this mnemonic CPS, common source epidemics, propagated epidemics, slow or modern epidemics in short-term fluctuations or periodic fluctuations. This can be a short note in the university examination, that is short-term fluctuations. The entire time trends can be a long question in the university examination. Now, all this we need to understand about in the short-term fluctuations is what is an epidemic curve. So epidemic curve is nothing but the graph of the time distribution of epidemic cases. So if you look at this epidemic curve, we find on the x-axis that is the time, and on the y-axis is the number of cases. And there is exposure which results in a case in after a period of time. So these are the number of cases which increase with the passage of time. So the number of cases have increased with this passage of time, and the number of cases decreased with the passage of time. So the incubation period may vary from the entry of the disease agent to the exposure of the first sign or symptom. So it can be, since the incubation period is variable, the it can be as short as this or it can be as long as this. For this case, the incubation period for this case at the tail end of the curve, the incubation period can be here, from here, this point to this point. So incubation period is generally variable as we see. So what does this epidemic curve suggest? It suggests time dilation exposure to a suspected source. It can be a cyclic or a seasonal pattern or common source of propagated spread of the epidemic. So what we see is epidemic curve is a rise of the cases and rise of the curve and fall of the curve, signifying the occurrence of cases with a period of time. Now these are the various epidemic curves that has been shown in this particular slide. Now let me explain what are the common source epidemic. As I said earlier, it is of two types: single exposure point source epidemic or continuous or multiple exposure epidemics. Multiple exposure epidemics. Single exposure or point source epidemics, they are also known as point source epidemics, as we discussed earlier. Here the exposure to the disease agent is brief and essentially simultaneous. It means all the resultant cases develop within one incubation period of the disease. Example, food poisoning. So in this case, what it happens is all the people are exposed to the particular incriminating agent. For example, food poisoning in a hostel. All the students residing in the hostel who partake the food at the same time are exposed to the food poisoning. The next slide illustrates a common source single exposure epidemic. So here what we see is the exposure to an infectious agent, say food poisoning, and resulting of the cases. See the rise of cases in a small period of time. This is a clustering of cases over a small period of time. So the incubation period can be from here to here or from here to here. So incubation period varies, as I said earlier. So x-axis shows the time, the y-axis shows the number of cases. And what is this median incubation period? It is the time period or the incubation period where 50% cases of the 50% cases occur following exposure to a particular disease agent or a particular event. So this is 50% of cases have occurred. So this is known as median incubation period. This point to this point is known as the median incubation period. This is another slide showing the point source epidemic. Here the median incubation period, as I said earlier, is from this point, that is a source of infection, a source of exposure, and this is the point where 50% cases occur, that is known as median incubation period. So this is one slide showing again what is a point source epidemic. Usually in a point source epidemic, the curve has only one peak. One point of interest is the medium incubation period, as I said earlier. So main features of the point source epidemic are the epidemic curve rises and falls rapidly with no secondary waves or curves. It means that there is a rise and fall with no secondary curves. There is again explosive number of cases, or the epidemic tends to be explosive, that is clustering of cases or large number of cases occur within a narrow interval of time. So that is what is meant by clustering or having large number of cases. This happens when the epidemic is explosive. All the cases develop within one incubation period of the disease. So all the cases, as I said earlier, develop within one incubation period. And exposure is almost simultaneous and brief. It means all are exposed to the infectious agent or to the health related activity or any particular activity. The various examples under point source epidemic are Bhopal gas tragedy in India. If you remember this gas tragedy by Union Carbide Company, which was in Bhopal, there was a release of gas in December 2nd and 3rd. It happened in the midnight of December 2nd, way back in 1984, when there was a release of methyl isocyanate gas, and this gas has affected all the people in and around Bhopal. So this is the Bhopal gas tragedy, and this was due to the explosion of the methyl isocyanate gas to the people there. There were around 5,85,000 people who were affected by this methyl isocyanate gas that was released, and it was only one point of time. That is December 2nd, midnight of December 2nd, and continued till 3rd of December of 1984. So there is a exposure to all the people at one particular point of time. Minamata disease in Japan. This is due to the consumption of fish and aquatic food rich in methyl mercury. So this Minamata Bay in Japan, there was a disposal of the factory waste that was dumped in the sea in Minamata Bay, and people used to consume the fish from the Minamata Bay, and these fish were intoxicated, or the fish were having the poisonous material which the factory was dumping, that is methyl mercury. So this Minamata disease causes ataxia, numbness, and various other neurological symptoms of the neurological deficit in people. So this is about two classic examples of point source epidemic. It can be the example of a point source epidemic can also be a fire accident in an industry. Fire that happens in an industry is one time, and all the employees or workers in a factory are affected. So the fire accident can be taken as an example of point source epidemic. If the epidemic continues over more than one incubation period, it means that it is a continuous and multiple exposure to a common source or a propagated spread. It means if there are multiple curves in the epidemic curve, because there is more than one incubation period of the particular infectious agent. Now what we study is continuous or multiple exposure epidemics. In this type, exposure from the same source may be prolonged. It can be continuous, it can be repeated or intermittent, but not necessarily at the same time or place. So what we need to understand is the exposure from the source can be continuous source, or it can be repeated or intermittent. A prostitute can be examples are a prostitute can be a common source in a gonorrhea outbreak. A prostitute may infect a client continuously, or continuously in the same locality, or maybe in different localities. Likewise, a well of contaminated water resulting in a cholera outbreak. The people who drink water from this well, so they get exposed to this particular infection. Suppose a group of people are infected, then we can construct an epidemic curve. And another group of people, again, when they consume this particular water, they also get the disease, and we construct another epidemic curve. So there will be multiple curves because of continuous exposure of different groups of people to a particular infectious agent or a particular activity. A nationally distributed brand of vaccine, say polio vaccine. Suppose a polio vaccine is defective, or a polio vaccine is having some source of contamination. It can affect children who have taken this vaccine in a particular geographical area. Or it can be a food wherein consumed by people in a particular geographical area. So those who consume the food repeatedly without knowing its toxicity, or without knowing it whether it is infective or poison or not, they can develop this type of epidemic. Likewise, Legionnaires disease in Philadelphia, which occurred in the summer of 1976, there is also an example of this continuous exposure or continuous or multiple exposure. Now, there is a variation to the above model is that an epidemic may be initiated from a common source and then continue as a propagated epidemic. In what happens in this example is in waterborne cholera, the epidemic reaches a sharp peak, but tails off gradually over a long period of time, because the people who are affected by this they tend to infect others also, and in this process of time, the number of cases that occur keep on occurring over a period of time. This way it tails over a long period of time. So this is the slide which is showing the epidemic curve of a repeated exposure. As I said, there would be multiple curves. If a group of people are exposed to this, say, a well of contaminated water, then we have the epidemic curve for this. Now another group of people who are affected to this well of contaminated water will get another epidemic curve. So there will be a number of curves depending upon the exposure to this particular infection or particular consumption of food. So we see number of curves. This is the classic example of John Snow's discovery of cholera, being the cholera, where he has incriminated as a polluted water being responsible for cholera, and this much before the discovery of Vibrio cholerae. So he has pointed to the people that the water that comes from this particular hand pump has cholera organisms, which results in cholera to the people. So we'll be discussing later in the next class about this classic observation or discovery by John Snow, even before the discovery of Vibrio cholerae being the incriminating agent for cholera disease. The next important epidemics is propagated epidemics. Now, usually a propagated epidemic is most often of infectious origin, and it results from person-to-person transmission of an infectious agent until all the susceptibles are affected. Here what it happens is a group of people who are infected, they tend to infect other people. Likewise, the chain of infection goes on until all the people who are non-infected become infected, and the susceptibles are finally depleted. So here the epidemic shows a gradual rise and fall of gradual rise and tails off over a much long period of time. Example are epidemics of hepatitis A, polio, and measles. Now, the spread of this particular propagated epidemic depends upon herd immunity of the people affected, opportunities for contact, and secondary attack rate. Propagated epidemics are more likely to occur when a large number of susceptibles are aggregated, or where there is a regular supply of new susceptible individuals like births and immigrants lowering herd immunity. So as long as there is a increased number of births, as long as there are increased number of immigrants, we keep on having large number of susceptibles, and there is every chance of a propagated epidemic occurring among the community. Next slide shows the course of a typical propagated epidemic, in which the agent is transmitted by contact between the individuals. Now, if you see this course of a typical propagated epidemic, here we see it is divided into three sections: initial period of epidemic, height of epidemic, and termination of epidemic. And we find two circles. One is infected, the white circle is an infected person who infects others. Another is a dark circle which shows that a person who is already infected, but he is not able to infect others. So that is how the entire propagated epidemic works. So the empty rectangle shows susceptible population. Again, the shaded rectangle shows immune population. So as As we see with the course of the height of the epidemic, we find there's a 50% of susceptible and 50% of immune population. With the termination of the epidemic, we find more of people who are infected and become immune to the disease, and we find very less number of infected people with the termination of the epidemic. So each person tends to infect others, and we find at the height of the epidemic more number of people who are infected, and at the termination of the epidemic we find more number of people becoming immune. The dark circles, in fact, people who are infected and have become immune, so they are not going to infect other people. This is the typical example of how the course of a typical propagated epidemic looks like. Now, the epidemic curve of a propagating epidemic is, we have the number of curves over here, secondary curves, what we said to be of secondary curves with the passage of time. We find the number of cases keeps on increasing with the contact of infected people to fresh people who can be immigrants or people or susceptible people or people who are born. So they get infected, and this keeps on increasing like this. So there are a lot of secondary curves in this epidemic curve. Modern or slow epidemics. This is in reference to non-communicable diseases. So in case of non-communicable diseases like cancer, hypertension, and diabetes, they are seen to increase in number compared to that of the previous century because of the changes in lifestyle and the quality of life among human beings. We find more and more people have become sedentary, more and more people are exposed to various agents, like various habits like smoking, gambling, or having a lot of consumption of alcohol. So changes in the lifestyle and the quality of life, in fact, is responsible for causation of many non-communicable diseases, and that's why they are known to be known as modern epidemics or slow epidemics. So you should need to understand in short-term fluctuations, what are the various types? They are continuous epidemics, propagated epidemics, slow or modern epidemics. So this is one part of short-term fluctuations or periodic fluctuations. The next is periodic fluctuations. Now, periodic fluctuations again are divided into seasonal trends and cyclical trends. Seasonal trends, as we understand, is according to season, and seasonal variation is well-known characteristic of many communicable diseases, as we understand in case of measles and varicella, cerebrospinal meningitis, upper respiratory tract infection, malaria, polio, etc. It has been seen that measles and varicella usually occur in early spring. Likewise, upper respiratory tract infection is seen in winter months because of the coldness of the weather and because of overcrowding, and people tend to be closeted in a particular accommodation or a house. And bacterial gastrointestinal infections, say diarrhea, dysentery, during summer months is because of the warm weather, which helps in the multiplication of the organisms causing gastroenteritis, and also in the multiplication of flies, which act as vectors as far as the transfer of these particular organisms are concerned from one person to another, or from food to the food, from the filth to the food. It's not only the infectious or the communicable diseases which exhibit seasonal variations, but there can be various non-infectious diseases or conditions which may exhibit seasonal variation. For example, sunstroke, hay fever, and snake bite. Sunstroke usually happens during summer season, and it is again seasonal. Hay fever usually occurs in autumn or spring, especially during the harvest season. And snake bites also occur in times, especially in the autumn and spring, especially when the snakes come out in the wilderness and they bite human beings. Some epidemiologists would regard seasonal trend as a form of cyclical trend. Now, as I mentioned earlier in a slide, the same slide we are again showing, it shows a typical seasonal trend, the outbreaks of dengue or dengue fever. So, if you see the seasonal trend of dengue or dengue hemorrhagic fever in India in 2005 to 2007, we find the dengue fever cases in 2005 starting in late summer and and continuing early rainfall and continuing till November. So all the dengue fever cases occur. And as you know, dengue fever is caused by which type of mosquito? That is Aedes mosquito, which multiplies in small artificial collections of water. Likewise, in 2006, we have observed again it occurs in late rainy, late summer and early rainy season, where there is a and then speaking of the cases, especially in the months of September, October, and November. Likewise, in 2007, the same trend is observed. So it is observed that it has a seasonal trend, especially from July to November, especially during the late summer and early rainy season. What is cyclical trend? As the name suggests, cyclical trend means there is a tendency of the disease to occur in cycles. That is in cycles, which will spread over a short period of time, which may be days, weeks, months, or years. So as we call it a cycle, there is a repetition after a period of time. So for example, measles in the pre-vaccination era appeared every 2 to 3 years. It means every 2 to 3 years, measles used to appear or there's a height of measles cases. So the 2 to 3 years is known as cyclical trend. Every 2 to 3 years. It means if we today if it is 2020 this year, there can be measles again in 2022. So that is an example. This was only in pre-vaccination era when vaccines were not given to measles vaccinations were not given to children. Likewise, rubella seems to occur every 6 to 9 years, and influenza pandemics occur every 7 to 10 years. This is what's the frequency which has been found. Non-infectious diseases may also show periodic fluctuations. Like automobile accidents in US are more frequent in weekends on Saturdays. So Saturdays are usually holidays as far as US is concerned, and more people will love to travel during Saturdays to their homelands or picnic places or sites of tourist interest. And during this time, there's a large density of vehicles plying on the roads in US, which may result in automobile accidents. A knowledge of cyclicity of disease is useful that it may help or enable communities to defend themselves. So if we happen to know that more accidents are occurring in US on particular Saturdays, we need to be responsible and we have to use all protective measures to prevent ourselves or themselves from accidents. Long-term or secular trends. The word secular implies changes in the occurrence of a disease over a long period of time. So secular doesn't mean that we are a secular party or a secular nation where every religion is treated alike or where every people are treated alike irrespective of religion, caste, creed, and community. So here secular implies mostly religion in our constitution. But here the word secular means changes in the occurrence of the disease. It can be progressive increase or decrease over a long period of time. It can be several years or decades. So secular means change in the occurrence of disease over a long period of time. That is what is meant to be by the term secular trend. This long period of time can be either years or decades. So the diseases which have a consistent upward trend in the developed countries during the past 50 years or so are, we found that these diseases in the past 50 years in developed countries have increased. They are coronary heart disease, lung cancer, and diabetes. So all these non-communicable diseases have increased with the passage of time, that is during the past 50 years. As we said, with a long period of time, so there is an upward trend in this long period of time. Now, diseases which have been shown a decline for a long period of time are tuberculosis because of vaccination and also because of multi-drug therapy and because of use of various wonderful anti-tubercular drugs. Likewise, typhoid fever because of the increase in personal hygiene and also safe hygienic practices as far as cooking of food is concerned and use of antibiotics and vaccines. Likewise, diphtheria and polio, because of the vaccines, these diseases have come down. So it is very important that we need to understand when we use the word secular. So the time trends of the disease, what we need to understand is um, short-term fluctuations, periodic fluctuations, long-term or secular trends. Short-term fluctuations can be continuous, propagated, slow or modern, and periodic fluctuations can be seasonal, cyclical, and long-term fluctuations or secular trends is what we have studied for various diseases, especially non-communicable diseases, which have shown a rise, and communicable diseases which have shown a decline with a passage of a long period of time. So this time trends is a very important question in the university examination. Now for a brief recap, the various steps of descriptive epidemiology are uh, defining the population under study, defining the disease under study, describing the disease by time, place, and person, measurement of disease, comparing with known indices, then formulation of a etiological hypothesis. Now, what are the interpretation of the time trends? Epidemiologists, by monitoring time trends, seeks which diseases are increasing and which are decreasing and which are emerging health problems, and what are the various measures that we can use them to control these particular diseases. He tries to formulate etiological hypothesis in a sense that what is the he tends to find a relation between the risk factor and the disease, or an agent and the disease, and he tries to form a supposition or a statement associating the relation between stating the relation between a causative infective agent and a disease, or a risk factor in a particular disease. By studying time trends, he seeks to provide guidelines to the health administrator in matters of prevention and control of disease. So if he has knowledge of time trends, he can very well share this knowledge to the health administrator, and as a precaution or as a prophylactic way, can implement all the public health measures that are required for the prevention and control of a particular disease. Thank you very much for your patient hearing. Hope you read this chapter. And the next part, the steps of descriptive epidemiology, will be discussed in detail in the subsequent class. Thank you very much.